This is partially a comfy video. It's also about some of the rules of composition. I hate to call them rules, but some of the ways that you can think about composition would be better. The rules thing is, the golden mean and God knows what else aren't really helpful, I don't think. But one thing I dislike about AI images is that the lack of compositional sophistication and subtlety. So the subject is always there, cat, and that's not great. I mean, as a composition, that's rubbish. It's all right for a portrait. So I mean, not in portrait mode, but if we have a portrait, then yeah, sure, we're going to have we're going to pretty much always have our subject like that, which is fine. Which is why AI does quite nice portraits. Really, it can do inflatable babes forever, well, quite nicely framed. But if we have a more complicated scene, then, for example, if we have a castle, AI castles tend to be like that. And our castle is always in the middle like that. And that's not great. It's very often the horizon as well is along this line here. And it makes for a pretty uninteresting image. I mean, it might all the castle and so forth will all be beautifully rendered, and the river will be lovely, and the trees will be lovely, but the arrangement of the stuff in the picture is not very nice. So one of the first things for a painter, and I'm a painter more than I'm a AI person, is called the rule of thirds. So if we split our image up into roughly 3, and I do mean roughly, then we can think about where we might put stuff, and the places we might have our castle. Shall we stick to a castle? We'll fade that back a little bit maybe. The places we might have our castle are centered here, 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 and here. So let's try it. So there's our castle. Not a very good castle, but there you go. And a river coming from the castle might go around here, pass through the other point there. Our horizon is here, so our mountains are going to be that. We might have another thing there, and we might have a bridge crossing at this point. So that's one possibility for our placement of our castle, and that will almost certainly look nicer than the castle in the middle. My drawing isn't nice, I appreciate that. But I'm trying to do this as broadly as possible. So somewhere else we might have our castle. So we might have a lot of sky, in which our castle could be down here, with our horizon here, and our river like that. And our mountains going across there, and maybe our sky focusing in. And that as well will look a lot better than the castle in the middle. Now, what I don't want to do is give the impression that this is a rule. It's not a rule, it's just a way of beginning to think about where you want things in a picture. And your picture, if you give some consideration to where things are and in what order they'll be seen, will, I think, usually be a nicer picture. Okay, so that's dealt with the rule of thirds. You can split it up differently. You don't have to have thirds. So we could perhaps get rid of the horizontals and the verticals. Get rid of that. Maybe we have thirds across here, or we have quarters here. So if we have our horizon up here, we might have our castle here. We've got a high view now. We might swing our river right over to there, and we might have some mountains. Distant sea, perhaps. I'm just making this up. But again, that's perfectly satisfactory. So it's not a rule as such. All it is a way of making you think about it first. And once you've made your composition, you can change it. So I'll zoom out a bit for that. So we can slide our composition. We can slide our composition about. And that's another way of doing it. And that brings me to cropping your ComfyUI generations. If your generation has done this, you don't have to keep it that way. You can crop images using a crop node, and you can decide to have your picture anywhere within here. It can be there. You don't have to accept the image you're given. You can crop into it. You can find a picture inside it. I could perhaps demonstrate that with a generation here. So here we have. It doesn't want to be the right size. So here we have an image, which is it's a good example actually. It's got no composition interest. Look at this bloke here. Look at this bloke here. He's absolutely dead centre. And the horizon line, i.e. the perspective centre line, is exactly along that line there. But what we can do, we don't have to accept that image like that. We could maybe change our composition. And if you notice, Photoshop already knows about the rule of thirds. You see, it gives you your set of thirds there. So we can have this chap here, and we have this light on the line here. So if we accept that, that is a more interesting composition. And all you've done is just chop it out of a larger generation. So, and I don't often see people doing this, and it's such an easy thing to do. And then you can generate from this, using this as an image to image, and your final image will be so much better. So I think that's all I've got to say on basic composition. I'll say a little bit more, throw that in the bin. So the other thing is weight. So if you've got our big heavy old castle here, if you imagine it sitting on a seesaw, then to balance your castle you need another castle that big. But that would look really rubbish. In fact, you can, well, I'll draw that in, you can see how it looks rubbish. AI is very prone to doing this sort of thing, you see, as well. You know, it split it into two images. And as you see, it really doesn't look very nice, does it? Because basically what is happening is that these two are in competition. We don't quite know. So a better solution to that, not the only solution, just another solution, is to balance it with something a bit further over here that's smaller. So it works exactly the same as weights on a set of scales. So if I have a smaller building there, doesn't it look better? And if our river or road or something doesn't go smack towards us, then that looks better again. And you can sort of add to, so that gives you a pretty good guide as to how you might arrange things in a picture. So things have weight, and you can balance them as if it's on a set of scales. So I think that's covered that particular aspect, and we'll move on to tone, which is the next big compositional item, and it encompasses light and lighting. So it's quite a big subject, but they're intimately joined together. And we're going to now think about tone. So to that end, we'll go for something big and black. So say, and bearing in mind that we've talked about compositional arranging. So we have our castle, and then we perhaps have our hills behind. And if you want to learn more about this, it's there's a huge amount of videos of varying quality about painting composition. You can steal stuff from them. So this is a three-tone drawing, what is in the painting world called a no-tan, which is a very, very basic schematic of how your composition might be. So there we go. And we can see that from our previous talk about balance, that we could perhaps do something here to balance. So now we have, and we could have it here as well, couldn't we? So we now have a four-tone no-tan. So we're using what we learned on our composition. We have our horizon here on the third, and we have our castle roughly on the third as well. But we have almost got a whole picture. You can actually, we might do this. I can put this image, simple as this, into Comfy, and we can make a generation, and we will get a perfectly good image from it. And we'll do that next, I think. So here we are in Comfy, and I've written a simple prompt, a list really, of what we have in there, and there's a bit of a lore in there to give it some interest. And here is our very basic black and white, and I don't expect this to make a nice generation, but you'll see what it does. So here we have it, and this does in some ways demonstrate how keen the model is to have the horizon halfway. It has moved the horizon, tried to move the horizon up. Hasn't quite succeeded. The horizon is really about here, which is fine. We could have had a slightly cleverer castle. And of course the colour is very muted. And we can come back to that. But you could, for if you want to take it a stage further, we could process that to make it a bit different and then refine from there if we wanted. I don't think it's worth it for this. But it gives you an idea of how even a really simple image like this can turn into something. So this does automatically highlight our next problem, or next thing to consider maybe. The next part of the puzzle is colour. And when we talk of colour, we talk of colour harmony. Most being derogatory about AI images, but most AI images, there is no colour harmony. It is just, usually it's got every single colour in there. Maybe not if you prompt neon and night or whatever, but even so, all the colours will be pretty much saturated, and they'll be full on red, yellow, whatever. But again, that doesn't necessarily produce the best image. So, or most engaging image, right? We'll call it engaging, i.e. what we want is an image that's going to draw the viewer in. And by using colour harmony and the other tricks of composition that I very briefly outlined, then we can make a more engaging image that might be looked at for more than a microsecond. They don't hold your breath. Most AI images are only ever looked at for a fraction. So we'll go back into Photoshop and have a think about colour. So here we're back in Photoshop with our not great image. Castle's a bit dodgy. We could maybe improve that with a bit of make our castle a bit more interesting. Stick another bit over there. Right, so that's as far as I'm going to bother with the castle. And you can see how the one became the other there. But this is rather boring colour-wise. And that brings another subject in. So what we'll do is we'll make this a single colour. That'll do. Then we'll duplicate it. And then we'll make that one a different colour. So one warm, one cool. And we can switch between two. And they're both nicer than the original, really, because they have what I'm talking about. They have harmony. And we'll also now do the other thing we talked about earlier, which is reframe this. So we don't have to accept the original composition. We can remake it to be different, to be nicer. Okay, so what we can do now is we got a warm, we got a cool. We don't want too many colours. If you have every colour under the rainbow, your image won't have mood or atmosphere, or it won't have as much as you might like. So what we could do, just to demonstrate, we could go from one to the other. So that's from blue to warm, although the light is going the other way on this. So we might go from warm to blue. And look how much more interesting that is immediately. We haven't done very much. It's certainly not it's not a finished image or anything, but it's quite interesting. And we maybe need a bit of a sky or some indication of sky for the poor old sampler to get hold of. So we'll give it a bit of a colour in the sky. So there we go. That's a very slight hint of colour in the sky. And we've only got two colours, or three colours I suppose, with the sky. And we'll put that through Comfy again just to show what that does. So here we are back, and we've loaded in our colour, and look at what has happened. So there we have an image which could be taken further. Well, we could refine that just for fun. But while we're here, let's just look at the colours. Now you see here we have complementary colours. We have colours that are all helping each other. We've got a little bit of red in the sky, but we have no primary colours at all. But it still makes a very harmonious and, I think, more satisfactory image than many you see. And we've got a little bit of a focus here with this. I think they're having a bonfire in there. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we'll refine that once just to see how it goes. So here we are with that back. As you see, we've got quite a nice image. And it demonstrates the balance thing in that this large shape here is balanced by these two here. And we've got a little bit of a narrative here. We've got the river flowing off and the path flowing off as well. Got rather a strange river coming in there that I don't approve of, but that's mostly good. So I know people are now going to say, well, you did that drawing and you've been drawing for years and it's very easy for you. So I'll do the same process but without the drawing skills. So I'll do it with straight text to image and show your options. If your drawings of cats come out like penguins, then you can do good composition. It's not just smug artists like myself who can use it. So we'll do that now, and what we'll do, we'll get rid of that, and we'll put an empty latent image in. We'll keep a landscape proportion, but we'll make the image a little smaller. And if you're doing text to image, then you need a slightly fancier prompt. So we need to know, okay, so we've, all I've done is I've just given a little bit more information about the scene, and then we'll generate on that and see what we get. So here's that back, and as you see, we got more or less a straight line across there, where our horizon is. It's a bit, and our castle is, as I predicted, smack in the middle, and we've got a pretty symmetrical composition. We've got some nice things. We've got nice, quite nice lighting. I quite like the colouring. So how can we manage to, get some of our compositional stuff into this? Well, it's actually very simple. You can just crop. So if we take this image, go for search for crop, we'll put a preview image down here so we can see what we're getting, and that'll chop a bit out of that. Okay, so there's one possible, and we could move it down a bit on the Y to get our bridge in. That's quite nice. Could move it to the left a little bit, so we can do that here. So there we go. So there's our original. We'll put them side by side there. And now we have lost all of the, let's change that to 576. It's a little bit better. We'll make it 960 wide. But I think you get the drift. We can crop out a better picture from our, let's have X0. And I could do with losing a bit of that over there. So we could come down to 896 maybe. There we go. And then we can take that image on and refine it. So that's one part. Now what we can do also is have a look at the colour. We want to resize it to a slightly better size. And what else can we do? It's a bit too saturated, so now we can play with it here because we've got a colour correct in here. Then we can make lots of changes. That one's a really horrible one. But as you see, with this little box here, you can change things. Now we might want to be a little bit more subtle with this, and so what we could do is to control the lighting a little bit. So it'd be nice if the lighting was sort of here and it faded off either side, and we can actually do that. So one thing we can do is we've cropped our image, and then we can make this little node group here with which we can play around with it. So we've split our image up and we've made a darker version and a lighter version, and we can mix the two together, which, as you see, I'll bring the unadjusted one up close, which, as you see, has a little bit more atmosphere in it, and we'll see how that refines. And I think that more or less covers. So even if you can't draw or anything, you can get your start image, go back, put our start image in there as well. Let's have a look. So we've taken a very standard AI type image and we've reformatted it so that it just has a bit of a better composition and doesn't have that dreadful centered look that nearly all AI generations have. Anyway, so what we'll do, refine that and see if I was talking nonsense or not. So here we are with that back, and here's where we started from, and here's where we ended up. It's not the finest castle ever produced by AI, but I think you'll have to agree it has a better composition and tone structure and atmosphere than the original does. So what I'll do now is go back to Photoshop and we'll do a few more options on how you can think about composition. So here we are back in Photoshop, and I want to underline really that there are no rules in particular, but there are just things you might think about when you're making an image. One of these is the journey. So if we say our destination is there, and maybe we're coming into the image here, what route could we take to? How do we get from A to B? And is it an interesting journey? Well, let's think about it. So we'll be really corny and stick with the castle. So that's our journey. That's our destination. They're serving lunch. And you're hungry. And you're coming in here. So we need a route away from there. We don't necessarily need to join the two up, but we can do. We'll put a bit of a road going between. And then we could maybe say, this is a cliff. And this is sea. And we can follow the edge of the cliff. So what I'm getting at, it doesn't have to be anything as obvious as a road. It can be a line of trees. It can be anything you want, really. But what we have made is essentially a journey, and people's eyes really like going on a journey in an image. So what you're doing is exploiting a natural tendency that people have anyway. And this can be, I mean, the most obvious one of the journey is the car, the empty desert road, the distant mountains, which is the most basic journey. And this is all basically narrative. So to go more on narrative, we might have a close-up figure. And whenever you have a figure, you automatically have a story. It might be a superhero, it might be anything you want. You might be a solicitor or an accountant. Anyway, so if you have a very obvious subject like this, which again we'll position a bit carefully, notice on that third there. So if you have a really obvious subject, you want to build your picture around the subject. And it doesn't really matter what this stuff is. It's more important is the position of it relative to our character. So we might be in a room, steampunky machinery, whatever you want. But what you've done is make a little narrative. So you've got person, place, character of the place, what's he doing there. Narrative is about asking questions. What's he doing there? Who is he? What's he going to do? What sort of person is he? Whatever. And these are all questions you answer with your picture. But asking questions and narrative is an inherent part of composition. And I think that's the subject about covered. There's a lot more, and once you know these, the basic things to look out for, you can watch plenty of other videos that go into all of these aspects with more detail. Okay, so I hope that was interesting and useful. I might make another one on this going into each of the areas a little bit more. But for now, that serves as a sort of very rough and ready introduction to the subject. Okay, thanks for your attention. That's the lot.